Hi, I'm Santosh, OpenShift architect with Red Hat. In this video, we will cover how we can easily migrate stateless workloads from an OpenShift 3 cluster to an OpenShift 4 cluster using CI/CD pipelines. Firstly, a clarification. If you're building net new pipelines on OpenShift 4.x cluster, then please use OpenShift pipelines, which are basically Tecton for continuous integration and Argo CD for continuous delivery. In this video, though, we will be discussing how we can leverage existing Jenkins-based pipelines that customers already have to deploy stateless workloads from an OpenShift 3 cluster to an OpenShift 4 cluster. Firstly, we will grant Jenkins the authorization to deploy onto an OpenShift 4 cluster. We'll then extend the existing Jenkins pipelines to deploy the apps onto the OpenShift 4.x cluster. What exactly is the motivation to get onto OpenShift 4 platform? OpenShift 4.x is an entire architectural redesign compared to OpenShift 3.x platform. OpenShift 4.x has RHEL CoreOS as the underlying immutable operating system. A fundamental difference between OpenShift 3 and OpenShift 4 is that OpenShift 4 uses pieces of software called operators. OpenShift 4 cluster is installed using operators, which are a method of packaging, deploying, and managing a Kubernetes applications. OpenShift 4 offers repeatability of installation and upgrade, over-the-air updates for an OpenShift components, seamless deployment onto any cloud or on-prem environment, and auto-scaling of cloud resources. Also, with OpenShift 4, you'll be on the latest and greatest version of Kubernetes. Now let's get to the demo. I have two OpenShift clusters running. One is an OpenShift 3.11 cluster, other is an OpenShift 4.9 cluster. In the OpenShift 3.11 cluster, I have two namespaces. In one namespace, I have Nodejs stateless application running. This is the web interface of that particular application. And in the other namespace called CICD, I have Jenkins running. Basically, the Jenkins pipelines build and deploy the Node.js application. We will first grant Jenkins the authorization to deploy the Node.js application onto the OpenShift 4 cluster. To do that, we'll click on the Jenkins web interface. We'll navigate to Manage Jenkins section. I'll click on the Configure System section. In the OpenShift Client plugin section, I'll click on Add OpenShift Cluster. This is the name of the cluster which we'll use in the Jenkins pipeline YAML. I'll call it Santosh Test. This is the API server URL of the OpenShift 4.x cluster. In the credentials section, I'll click on Add and select Jenkins. I'll select the kind as OpenShift Client plugin. In here, I'm expected to provide a token for the OpenShift 4 cluster. Let me log into the OpenShift 4 cluster. I'll create a new project called dev. I'll create a service account. I'll call it Jenkins user. I'll grant edit role to the Jenkins user service account. I'll describe this particular service account. I'll use this particular token to authorize Jenkins for deploying onto the dev namespace in OpenShift 4 cluster. I now have added the Jenkins credentials. I'm selecting the appropriate credentials. I'm disabling TLS verify. I'm setting the default project name to be dev, and I'm saving this. We now have authorized Jenkins to deploy onto the OCP4 cluster. We now will have to extend the Jenkins pipelines. They currently only build and deploy on the OCP3 cluster. Let me go ahead and modify the pipeline. This particular YAML will be provided in the GitHub link in the description. A key thing to note is we will be invoking the OpenShift 4 cluster by the cluster name which we specified in the Jenkins OpenShift client plugin. This is the name. And that's it. We'll save this particular Jenkins pipeline. We will start the pipeline. The Jenkins pipeline is now starting the build on OpenShift 4 cluster. Let's navigate to the builds. The Node.js application is being built on the OpenShift 4 cluster now. We have just extended the existing Jenkins pipelines to build and deploy on the OpenShift 4 cluster. The application has now been built and deployed on OpenShift 4 cluster. Let's access the route. The application is now up. So we have demonstrated how we can easily modify the existing Jenkins pipelines to migrate a stateless workload from an OpenShift 3 cluster onto an OpenShift 4 cluster. Thanks for watching this video. If you're interested, check out some of the other videos that our team has produced on this particular YouTube channel. If you have any questions, reach out to this particular email.